and welcome back to Carren's Couch. Now this week, as with every week, I've promised to bring you something mind-blowing, and again, this week is not going to fail. We've got two of the most extraordinary relationship experts joining us right here on the couch, looking at the difference between what it's like for men and what it's like for women in the context of relationships. Now, I know a lot of the people who follow Carren's Couch, they're going through changes in their lives. They're either setting up businesses or having babies. Life is a constant evolution and a constant change. Now, here's the problem though. When we've been in relationships with our partners for a longer period of time, sometimes when things change, sometimes there's support and sometimes there's not. Sometimes there are conditions that force us to start to demand more of each other, and sometimes we change completely. You think about it, from the time that you were 20 to the time that you turned 30, if you're that old, that 20 to 30 bracket, we do our greatest changing. Yet that's also the time where we tend to form our long-term relationships and get married and start families and all of that stuff. By the time we hit our 30s, and if you're that old, and then we hit our 40s if you're that old, and 50s if you're that old, and further, we're constantly changing. And what's happening is a lot of pressure and a lot of stress is being placed on our relationships. So the biggest things that suffer is love, acceptance, our kids, our connectedness. There's lots of components to a relationship that make it whole and make it work. And today we're lifting the lid on it. We're looking at what happens in the bedroom. We're looking at what happens if we're not supported by our men. We're looking at what happens if we're not supported by our women. And we're looking at the restrictions of time. How does time play a significant factor in whether we stay together or whether we split apart? So today, join me on the couch. We've got the amazing relationship expert, Guy Vicars, and we've also got his counterpart, Heidi Smith, who are looking at both men and women in relationships. And welcome to the couch, the amazing and very gorgeous Heidi Smith. Thank you so much for joining us, Heidi.
Thank you for the warm introduction.
It's a pleasure. And Guy Vicars, thanks so much for joining us in this really controversial topic. Thanks for coming on board.
Absolute pleasure, Carren. Hi, Heidi.
Yeah, cool.
Hi.
So, guys, let's get straight into it because this is a super meaty topic. And for our viewers and our podcast listeners, before we jumped on air, I had a sneak chat with Guy and Heidi and told them that we'll probably get them back on the show. So keep your eyes out for more of the relationshiping type of shows coming up in the future, because this is a huge topic. And we are just going to touch the surface of one issue that's affecting a lot of relationships. So let's get stuck into it. Let's start talking about it. Let's talk about the problems that are affecting relationships today. And the one that we have all three agreed is probably the most important is the limitations that we have in terms of time and being with each other and being able to connect with each other and be there for each other and fulfill each other's needs. Because for the most part, people who are following Carren's Couch, a lot of them are women, and a lot of our women are wanting to start their own business, or they're just having kids, or there's definitely changes that are occurring in their lives, which naturally has a flow-on effect to change in the relationships. I'm really super keen to talk to both of you about the challenges that we face both as women and as men, because there's this perception out there, and I don't know if it's true or it's not true, hence handing over to the experts. But there's a perception out there that women and men, so different. The two are never going to meet in the middle. We're never going to have a meeting of the minds. So we just have to accept that women are complicated and men are more simple, and that's the end of that. There's got to be more to it than that, doesn't there? What do you think about that, Guy? In terms of the challenges that we're faced with, what's it like for a guy, Guy?
Well, I don't know that my wife would say I'm simple, Carren, but anyway, we won't go into my relationship therapy right here.
That'll be the next show. That's the next show.
I think that the thing, I do think of it in a slightly different way from that, because what we've got is a huge cultural shift from traditional roles where people kind of knew what to do and how to do it, and people left each other alone to get on with doing that, And now, as you pointed out, there's so much change going on. Women are wanting to work, women are wanting to express their creativity by joining the workplace or being entrepreneurial, whatever it is. And this poses a problem for a relationship. If it sort of started out in a certain way, and let's say a woman in particular has had children and she's now ready to move on to another phase of her life. This is disruptive. No matter how much of a good thing it is, it's actually disruptive. So a lot of communication needs to happen between partners about this. I think the problem with men is that they are very much culturally entrenched in trying to fix things. So if they see a problem, they just want to kind of fix it and get... So we're talking about the same bloke, are we?
Yeah, is his name Matt?
Yeah. I think his name's kind of everybody, you know. Men don't like seeing their partners in distress, and men in general want to support their partners. But what can happen is that men can feel threatened by this change unless there's been some dialogue about it. Right. You know, and so I think that's the important thing, is the communication about the changes. I was talking to a guy just this morning who's exactly having this problem. His children are all late teenagers. They've just finished school, and his wife's really wanting to get into a whole bunch of stuff, which sounds great for her. He's been really used to being the bread maker, and she's looked after the family, and now he finds her changes really threatening.
Yeah.
But I can tell it's not because she's sort of wanting to leave or do anything like that. He just doesn't know enough about it yet.
So that's a really interesting point. Because if I even just refer back to my own personal experiences, I thought when I was going through the changes of, and I went through some massive changes in my life, and I thought by communicating and telling my partner what I was doing and why I wanted to do it and expressing my enthusiasm, I thought that was enough. But I don't think it is. I think there's got to be more to the communication so that then that level of comfort is enhanced rather than just being temporary.
Okay, so can I just introduce a concept here, one that couples find really helpful. So we've got two individuals. We've got Matt and Carren. I don't know if Matt's the bloke. I think
Matt is the bloke. You're
okay,
good.
So we've got Matt and Carren here, and they've got a third entity of the relationship.
Yes.
In other words, Carren says, listen, this is what I want to go about doing, and I'm going to tell Matt, and Matt's over here listening. But did Matt and Carren get together and think about, well, what's the impact going to be on this thing in the middle that we've co-created?
Right.
How's that going to change things? How can we think about what that might do? And people often skip past that. They get enthusiastic and they think this is all blue sky, it's fantastic. And the other partner takes the other pole and says, well, what about the problems? And they don't actually sort of get to that middle bit and say, how are we going to manage this together? Because we're in this together. If you want a career, I've got to be on board with you,
True.
It gets down to the P's, proper planning prevents poor performance. I think it's so scary starting a business. I've started a business myself, gone through the trauma, and your self-esteem gets really tested. You have to be really confident. You have to learn so many different things, not just your trade, but how to be a business person. And at the same time, you've got to manage this challenge of the impact of your family and your relationship. And so that planning and understanding the impact is very important.
Yeah, I think you're right, Heidi, in that your self-esteem does take a really heavy knock when you go through these sorts of changes, because I know for myself, I second-guessed myself all the way through my new initiatives and my new changes. I wasn't sure how it was all going to look. I didn't know if it was going to work. I didn't know, and I really felt like I needed the support of my partner to help me feel reassured. And then when I didn't get that, particularly in the beginning, I didn't get that. What I got was more questioning. I turned that questioning into meaning. You don't love me. You're not supporting me. I'm on shaky ground. I'm on new ground here, and I don't even know where I'm going. How can I get there if you're not on board with me? And that was the conversation that was going on between my two ears. Therefore, I was relating to him as if that was real and if that was the truth. But Guy, I think what you've done is you've hit the nail on the head there, because I think a lot of relationships fail to address the impact on that third entity in that it doesn't mean that anything gets sacrificed. It just means that we haven't addressed that and come up with the strategy, as Heidi says, and a plan to make that palatable for all parties.
Yeah. I agree with what Heidi's saying, is that planning, it goes a long way to addressing people's fears and I talked about threat before. We're very good as people at picking up threat first and love second. And what we're after is we're wanting love and support and that kind of thing. But, these changes, no matter how good they might be, at first will appear kind of threatening. And one of the things that I'd love to see couples do more is actually talk. We live in a culture where you're very much encouraged to think of what are all the positives, what are the great things, I'm all happy, blah, blah, blah. And so we don't give a voice to the inevitable and natural and normal negative consequences. Every change, no matter how good it is means leaving something behind, for example. And so if couples can talk about that together, talk about the good stuff and the bad stuff, then you go a whole long way to reducing that level of anxiety. And, you were talking before, Carren, about how you go about getting that support. To be able to articulate, when you ask me questions, and I'm wondering again, if we go back to this man thing, whether Matt was trying to fix things by asking those kinds of questions in a practical kind of way.
Totally.
You're actually communicating on different levels. One's a practical channel, which is what he's on to try and make sure it all works well. In other words, he thinks he's supporting you. You're after emotional stuff and it's not there, and you're thinking, well, where is he? And so you're kind of missing each other, even though you're both trying to work in the same direction. So having time and space for doing both is legitimate and valid.
And Heidi, that was one of the points that you made right up front, even before we started filming for today's show, was that time was a huge issue and a huge contributor to the effectiveness of relationships. What do you see from your practice, and when you're counselling, your clients? What do you see as been the biggest impact of that?
Look, they're pressed for time. They're busy people, whether they have a business or maybe it's just two people with careers, trying to juggle a family, particularly for women, still taking on all that stuff at home, like cleaning and cooking and having a career at the same time, looking after children. It's challenging. You can't do everything. I personally think everyone should invest in a cleaner if they have two incomes. It should solve a lot of problems.
Go the cleaner. Go the cleaner.
So, but yeah, look, time. We need more and more of it. With the house prices are rising, with the expectation that there's two incomes supporting it, and so more and more people are working, and yeah, we've got less time.
Do you think that that's one of the reasons why the communication isn't occurring? Because I know for myself, and also a lot of the women that follow the show, that there is definitely a mismatch in terms of what I'm saying and what our partners are hearing.
Yep.
And to actually understand that mismatch is occurring takes awareness, it takes presence of mind, it takes... really that's all it takes. It takes awareness and presence of mind. And because the time isn't there, is that where we're going wrong?
I think 70% of the time we're out of sync with our partner. And so being able to both engage and meaningful, connected conversation is something that we need to consciously decide to do. And too often we just get caught up in our lives and don't pay that attention, that time to connect.
So what do you think would be the how? How do we fix this component in terms of our relationships? Because things are going to get busier, with the advent of technology changing and growing and evolving. We are all wanting more. We're all wanting to create more, but we don't want to sacrifice anything. We want to have it all. So nothing's going to change. We can't go back to the way things were. What do you think? What do you think the answer is, Heidi?
Well, it's about quality time, not necessarily more time. So you can create little rituals of connection. Maybe it's your cup of tea or coffee in the morning. Maybe it's a conversation you have after dinner once the kids are in bed. Maybe it's going out for breakfast on the weekend. Putting that focus and that time into a ritual, a way that you and your partners connect, that's special to you.
And getting a cleaner.
And getting a cleaner, yeah.
Get a cleaner. What do you think about that, Guy? What do you think the answer is? Because as you know, we say nothing's going to change. So what do you think the answer is for us?
Look, the more I understand about relationships, and I'm learning about them all the time, and I'm also connecting this with our culture, as I was saying before, that, you know, as Heidi's saying, that there's all sorts of pressures, and we need to think about how we prioritise this. And when you sort of talk about money and investing in a cleaner, I, again, would love to see couples investing in this third entity in the relationship. Yeah. If you think about it, when we start out in that sort of romantic phase of a relationship, you put a lot of time and effort into each other, and it feels great because you're doing that. After a while, you think this is going to go somewhere, and then you start to take withdrawals out of that bank account, and you keep withdrawing, and you keep withdrawing, and you keep withdrawing, and eventually you go into deficit. You've got to put credits into that account to make sure that it's flush with funds, it feels really good, you're connected to each other. As Heidi's saying, you either have some rituals that you do together, but you've got to prioritise that, mainly because you two have both said that you've started a business, and I have too, so you know what it's like. Starting a business is really, really hard work. You get a lot of blows, a lot of knocks along the way. And what you need behind you is this formidable force of a good, strong relationship.
Yeah,
you know,
so
it's important to put that in place first. Then you're going to be able to cope with the knocks and blows that are inevitably coming from sort of trying to make it in the world, in the commercial space. You know,
I love how you say you've got to put credits into the bank account, and the message is loud and clear from both of you guys. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Did I just show my age with that song?
It's a good song.
Yeah, it is a good song. So let's talk about that, because sex is one of the first things out the window, particularly for women. And I know I speak for most women, but sex is the first thing that gets canned when we're flat out got too much on our plate and also feeling unsupported and unloved. And if we're missing in that conversation, as you said earlier, Guy, if we're missing in that conversation, you know, there's got to be intimacy outside of the bedroom before there can be intimacy inside of the bedroom for women. And I think that to a big extent, certainly from my point of view, that gets missed. So how can we support our men in loving us in the way that we need to be loved, so that then they can be loved the way that they need to be loved? Because I really get that we're on two different wavelengths when it comes to the old bedroom shenanigans.
I think that I like the way that you put that, is how do I support him or her to get what I need? And that you know, that
Did that
comes
sound manipulative?
Well, no, it comes back to this concept, you see. Of course we need to look out for each other. Of course we do. If I treat you with high regard and respect and consideration, and I think about your needs, even though they're different than mine, without losing my own needs, and I communicate about those things or whatever it is, of course we're going to get on better. A relationship can't sustain itself without intimacy. So it's really important that that's given consideration. Even if you feel like your libido's gone off, you need to, or your attraction or whatever it is, you need to grab a hold of that and talk about it and figure out a new way. Of course, our sex lives change just as the other things that we've been talking about. It needs no less communication, although people are more uncomfortable talking about it.
That's true.
They're sort of, if they find it easier to kind of do it, and then if it doesn't work, they kind of just quietly go their separate ways, you know, into other bedrooms or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of glue of a relationship, and everyone needs it. It's often at different levels and different rates, but we still all need that. That's what makes a primary relationship special, is that physical intimacy and connection.
What do you think about that, Heidi?
Look, I think we need to be appreciative of our sex differences. A lot of research doesn't support the fact that there are these communication differences between men and women, but one thing that's very clear is that the sex differences are about sex.
Yeah.
And the stereotypes such as men thinking about sex more during the day and women thinking less.
Now hang on a second. I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, Guy, but I heard men are thinking about sex every 15 seconds.
I can't talk. I'm thinking about sex. Sorry, what did you say?
I think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I think
you're hilarious.
It is still mostly true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Every 15 seconds, I'd be bored with it.
Yeah. And over time, the differences between men and women generally stay the same. And also men like to have sex because it helps them feel emotionally connected, and women need that emotional connection to be in the mood for sex.
Yeah.
Because women's sexuality is a lot more complicated than a man's sexuality. Women are shown to say that they're aroused by things, but not actually have physiological responses of arousal to things. They'll say they're not aroused to homosexual men in images, or homosexual women in images, and they'll show physiological arousal to that in studies. So women are very, very complicated. It is true. It's the only place where this sex difference really plays out.
So are we not honest?
They're honest with what we think we need. And I think it's important to respect those differences in a relationship, and be aware of it. And also, as a woman, be aware that we're very influenced by society and outside forces in shaping our sexuality, and we have to make a choice. Do we want to be influenced by the arguments about sex or stereotypes about sex, or do we want to be in charge of our own sexuality and feelings?
That's a really interesting conversation, and I would love to go down the rabbit hole with you on that one in terms of how, that women are influenced, because I think that in and of itself is a whole other show, and unfortunately we don't have the time. We're almost out of time now, but I would love to get you guys back on the show to explore that in terms of our ability to be influenced and how that then affects our behavior in relationship with each other. Because I think that, Guy, you certainly have an amazing angle when it comes to family of origin and how that influences our behavior in relationships. And, we continue to repeat what we're used to. And I really, really want to explore that. We've come to almost the end of the show now, and I feel like we've only just started. It's only just getting juicy. So to round us off in terms of our ability, like what do you think, but just based on what we've spoken about today, which is just really about time and how time affects our ability to relate to each other and also affects our ability to connect physically and emotionally. Guy, what would you say would be your top 3 tips that our listeners and our viewers could start to contemplate that could help them have more effective, mutually beneficial relationships with their significant other?
Okay, you're putting me on the spot, but I'll give it a crack anyway. I think that top 3, first one's always going to be communication.
Yeah.
But as Heidi said earlier, you can sort of make that work, as long as it's quality communication. Couples might only need 15 minutes to have quality communication. They might do a whole bunch of other things too, but you really need to check in with each other in a very genuine way. Yeah. Couples have been around forever because they actually work. Yeah. Couples work. So we need to look after that primary relationship because everything else actually flows from that. So the second thing is you've got to prioritize. You can use any metaphor you like. I've used the idea of a bank, but you can use a plant. You've got to keep it watered to make the thing grow. It's as simple as that. So it's not that complicated. Third thing, I think in terms of, things like sex and other things where someone wants more of one thing than the other, so long as you're putting into that bank account, then you can call on it. You can say, what, I've supported you with this. I need some support with that. When can we fit that in? So that you started off talking, Carren, about my individual needs versus my relationship needs. They've both got to fit in somehow, otherwise nothing works. And so when you've got enough in that emotional and relationship bank, then you can kind of call on it from time to time, so long as you put back in. So.
That's so interesting and so important. And I think the value in that contribution into that third entity or into that bank account is that it has to come from both parties.
Exactly.
And both parties have got to be aware of that third entity. You've introduced a concept that I think our listeners and our followers are really going to start to give some real consideration to, because for the most part, most people are pretty selfish. We think about ourselves and we think about our own needs, and we are the center of the universe. I mean, we grow up that way. Kids are the center of the universe. So we grow up with that belief of that I am important, I must put my needs at some point, and we sacrifice our own needs. And, you know, women traditionally will tend to do that a lot, but we've got to be able to contribute to ourselves and to the relationship and to the other person. Exactly. So it's not just you and me in the relationship, it's you, me, and the relationship.
Exactly.
I think that is really powerful, really powerful. Heidi, what would be your top 3 tips that you would suggest that our viewers and our listeners take away with to start to contribute to a more holistic relationship with their partners?
Well, I'm a lot more practical. Guy, I think he's covered off some good tips. But, you know, most of our arguments are about finances, chores, parenting, and sex. So if you can get yourself a financial planner, do a budget, if you can get a cleaner to do your chores,
right.
or have some sort of agreement about how you're sharing them, do a parenting course. You're never too old to learn something new. And then hopefully the sex should sort itself out after that.
Because you're buying yourself time, really, isn't it?
Buying yourself time, yes.
And I think both contingents are really, it's really crucial, because the practicalities of life on a day-to-day basis still play out. You still have money issues and you still have time issues, and there's still those differences in parenting, as you say. So I think actually this has been a really well-rounded, if not short, conversation about a really crucial topic. So if you guys are happy to come back on the couch, I would love to have you, and we just continue to explore the different challenges, I guess, that face us in relationships with each other. Because, Guy, you are dead right, and I share your view completely, is that from the relationship is born everything. So our relationships are not just important, they are everything in the context of humanity. So I really would love it if you guys would come back and join me on the couch. Is that a resounding yes?
Absolutely, love to.
Yay! Very cool. Well, thank you so much, both of you guys, for your energy and for your knowledge and your experience. And thank you so much for sharing it with us. I know that our audience is going to take away some real nuggets of gold and start to think about themselves and their relationships differently because of you. So you've made a real difference and a huge contribution today to tens of thousands of people. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carren. Appreciate you having me.
It's a pleasure. So to everybody who's listening and to everybody who's watching the show, you have just been introduced to Guy Vicars and Heidi Smith, absolute specialists when it comes to relationshiping. If you want to visit each of these guys on their website, you'll see the website addresses are on this page right underneath this video. So click on them and have a look at their websites and find out more about what they do and how they offer their services. You won't be sorry. I've been absolutely thrilled that we were able to resource these two. Thank you so much. And now, next coming up is Carren's Corner. And I'm going to be doing a review on some books that I absolutely love. And it's about relationshiping and also relationshiping with yourself. So sit tight, because here comes Carren's Corner. So welcome. And here we are in Carren's Corner. Now you're going to see 3 books in front of you that are 3 of my absolute favorites when it comes to relationshiping. But before we go there, I just have to share with you who I'm wearing today. Because thanks to Myers, I'm wearing the amazing Jason Brunsden's Black Label. Isn't it gorgeous? I love it, I love it, I love it. And it fits beautifully. So one of the reasons why I thought I would go to the extra trouble to tell you about what I'm wearing is because sometimes what we're wearing makes us feel good. I don't know about you, but when I put on my heels and I put on a fabulous snappy little dress like this one, I start to feel good about myself. And that's what I really wanted to share with you guys here in Carren's Corner today. Because even though we've just spent the last half an hour or 20 minutes with Guy Vicars and Heidi Smith talking about relationshiping and the issues that we have, there's one thing I want to say, and I really want to make sure that everybody hears it loud and clear. You know, we can't be in relationship with anybody out there until we're in relationship with the body in here. It comes from starting with us first. We've got to get intimate with us. And these are 3 books that I found along my path that have been nothing short of extraordinary. It takes work. You know, from a psychological perspective, we disconnect from ourselves from the time that we're kids. And it's only when we start to get older and we get into relationships that all of our stuff bubbles to the surface, and it's usually pretty yuck. The work starts here before the work starts inside of that third entity. We've got to come to a relationship feeling complete, whole, and I guess loving and accepting who and what we are, so that then our foundations are built on stone. And here's where some of the work can start for you guys, as it has for me. And trust me, it's an ongoing journey. Doesn't matter what I do or what Matt does, there's always going to be problems in a relationship. There's always going to be challenges and hurdles to jump. That's what growth's all about. So let me start with the very first book that I began my journey with that really opened my eyes to a new way of seeing myself. And I'm going to start by reading a little paragraph straight out of the front. This is Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. Chances are you've already got it in your library, or you've seen it, or you know someone who has it. It's worth getting your hands on a copy of it. It says, some points of my philosophy from Louise Hay. We are each responsible for all of our experiences. Every thought we think is creating our future. The point of power is always in the present moment, and everyone suffers from self-hatred and guilt. The bottom line for everyone is I'm not good enough. It's only a thought though, and a thought can be changed. We create every so-called illness in our body. That's what Louise Hay really believes. Resentment, criticism, and guilt are the most dangerous patterns. Releasing resentment will dissolve even cancer. Now there's a big statement. We must release the past and forgive everyone. We must be willing to begin to learn to love ourselves. Self-approval and self-acceptance in the now are the keys to positive changes. When we really love ourselves, everything in our life works. And if anything, I think that prefaces what this book is all about. It's an amazing book for you to start to have a look at what's going on inside. We're always looking at what's going on outside to try and fix ourselves. Doesn't start there, as I said, it starts in here. This was the first book that I found when I was about 19, so it's been around forever, and it's still just as relevant and potent right now. The next one that I found, oh my goodness, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. This is like a transformational guide over a 12-week period, and there's instructions, there's lessons, there's notes, there's lectures, there's everything that you could possibly want in here, but it forces you to disconnect from outside and connect inside. And there's two strategies that she talks about in this book that I still do to this day, even though I discovered this book about 10 years ago. I actually discovered The Artist's Way just after Greg committed suicide. I was completely lost and I hated myself with absolute ferocity. And I didn't know how to come back from that, even knowing that that was even an option. At the time that I found this book, it didn't save me. It took time. But since then, I've revisited The Artist's Way at least 5 times. And right now, I'm still reading it. So if you could see what I can see, there's a whole bunch of dog-eared pages and highlighted paragraphs. But the 2 key components of this book are, she tells you to go out on a date with yourself. Every week, go out on a date for 2 hours. And you're not allowed to share it with anybody. Only you going and doing something that's extra special to you. Now, if you know me and you've been following me, you know I'm a peanut, I'm a bit of an idiot, and I'm a real kid at heart. So I take myself roller skating. I did. I felt like a peanut. I was there by myself. I put on hired roller skates, so ill. But then I got out on the roller skating rink and I ripped it up like I was a rock star. I realized I could still roller skate. It's like riding a bike. I was whipping around that roller skating rink like a legend within no time. And I had a fabulous, fun time. But most of all, I had a fabulous, fun time with me. So the next week I went ice skating. That was a very different story. Bruised butt, bruised knees, grazed hands, it was all bad. But it was still me with me, and I loved it. Sometimes I go and sit on a rock, and I take my journal, and I go and write about how I'm just like a blade of grass. Or I might sit and admire the sunrise. And I try and see myself in the reflection of the sunrise and see what beauty is there and what beauty is here. You know, one thing that this book helped me to see is that everything that we see outside of ourselves is a reflection of what's inside. And it's not just the bad stuff. You know, you hear about it all the time. If, you know, we're just a reflection of each other, but we tend to only relate to that in the context of we're bad people. It's also in the beauty. So if I say you're beautiful, I can recognize beauty because beauty exists in me. If I say you're kind and soft and generous, it's because that's inside of me. And this really helped me dive deep inside and find all of those things. And then for me to be able to see it outside of myself, to see what it actually looks like, because I never would have known that it was there. The other thing that this book tells us to do is journal pages. Fantastic. Before you get out of bed, you have to have a journal next to your bed with a pen, and you're not allowed out of bed, not even to brush your teeth or go to the loo, until you've filled 3 pages of just emptying what's in here out onto your journal pages. And there are some mornings, and I still do it every morning religiously. There are some mornings I wake up and I think I have nothing to say, it's empty. And sometimes it's empty. So I'll write, it's empty, it's empty, it's empty, it's empty, it's got nothing, I've got nothing to say, there's nothing to say, there's nothing to say. But actually, now that I come to think about it, Matt last night, or Matt did this yesterday, or my mum did this, or my sister said that, or my producer did this, or my producer did that. So I'll always come up with something, usually by the 2nd or the 3rd page. But what happens when we empty what's going on between our 2 ears, the most miraculous event occurs. Clarity. Because when we've got uncontrollable chatter occurring between our 2 ears, and that's the way that we start our day continues that way. Now that's not only not good for us in terms of relating to others, but it's not good for us when it comes to making decisions in our business, when it comes to making decisions about our relationships, and it's also not good for us when it comes to decisions about our health and well-being, because there's no room for us to get clarity, insights, and inspiration. Have a look at The Artist's Way. You can get all of these books on Kindle. You can get all of these books on any of the online stores as well. Now this last one, The Untethered Soul. Now let me just see, I always forget, Michael Singer. This one I've only discovered recently in the last 3 months. The first half of the book, incredibly compelling. I could not put it down. Last half of the book took me a little bit of time to read through it. So I don't know if you're going to find the same thing as I did, but the first half of the book changed my life. And I can say that hand on heart, and I'm constantly working on myself, but the first half changed my life in the context of, it was kind of like the next evolutionary step from here. Because this forces us to do the journal of the morning pages, getting clarity in our head. But the Untethered Soul talks about how all of that chatter, we can actually remove it from ourselves. We can instruct the brain. Because here's the amazing thing about humans. Every part of our body, we can instruct it to move. Yet the only part of our body that we don't give instructions to is the brain. The brain thinks us. We don't think the brain. Think about that for a second. A thought arrives in your head and you have a party with it. You have a desire, or you have a concept that arrives in your head, and it just arrives there, right? And then the next minute you're weighing the pros and the cons and the shoulds and the shouldn'ts and the wills and the won'ts and the cans and the can'ts, and it becomes this circular conversation. Do you know that you repeat the same things to yourself 27,000 times a day? That's 27,000 ineffective thoughts you're having every day. And that's not the full gamut of all of the thoughts that you have. That's just the ones that get repeated. So in The Untethered Soul, he actually gives us instructions on how to take that chatter, that incessant chatter, and I know that you're all like me and we have lots and lots of chatter going on all the time, all day. He talks about how we can take that chatter, put it outside of ourselves and personify it, so that then we can walk it over to a couch, sit it down and get it out of our head. And then what gets left is the most blissful silence of nothingness. It takes practice, but it absolutely works. I've been practicing and working with this for the last 3 months, and I can honestly say I've never had more clarity and I've never had more conviction in my decisions and my choices than I've had in my entire life. And it's freeing, it's magnificent. So get your hands on The Untethered Soul if that's where you're up to. It's absolutely brilliant in the fact that it gives you instructions. So it doesn't just give you a broad brushstroke and this is what you should do, it tells you how to do it. And hopefully you'll be able to get through the last half of the book better than I did. I think I'm the kind of person that once I've got the gist of it, I'm ready to go play with my new toys and I want to see how it works. I don't want to sit reading anymore, I want to go play. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed the book review and you've at least got a place to start to go and investigate ways that you can fall in love with yourself in a really intimate way. Thank you for joining me here on Carren's Couch. May all your relationships be wonderful, especially the one with you. I'm going to see you right here, same place, same station on Carren's Couch next week. Bye for now.